Vitus Jonasson Bering, August 12, 1681 through December 8, 1741, was a Danish naval officer in the Russian naval service, an explorer of Kamchatka, the Pacific coast of Russia, and the western coast of North America, and a captain-commander of the Russian fleet. All the achievements of Vitus Bering were accomplished in 2 Kamchatka expeditions. The first Kamchatka expedition was 1725 through 1730. On August 16, 1728, Bering passed through the strait between Eurasia and North America and proved its existence and ended up in the Chukchi Sea. During the first expedition, the researcher was the first to describe the southern half of the western and eastern shores of Kamchatka and discovered the Avachi Bay, the Kamchatka Bay, and discovered the St. Lawrence Island. The second expedition to Kamchatka, or the Great Northern Expedition of 1733 through 1743, was carried out by V. Bering and A. Chirikov. Near the southwest of Alaska, desert and treeless islands were discovered, which the captain named Shumagon Islands. Moving west, Bering explored the Aleutian Chain. Here, the team first met the local residents, Aleuts. It was in this expedition that the coasts of Alaska, Aleutian Islands, Commander Islands, Kuril Islands, and Japanese Islands were mapped, and the impossibility of regular navigation through the waters of the Arctic Ocean due to solid ice was proven. 30 years later, the English navigator James Cook gave the strait a name of Bering and expressed his admiration for how perfect the maps made during his last campaign turned out to be. Bering's Journey, the second expedition. James Cook, November 7, 1728 through February 14, 1779. He was an English pioneer, navigator, and explorer, a member of the Royal Society of London for improving natural knowledge of London. In 1762 through 1767, already in command of the ship, he surveyed the shores of the island of Newfoundland, explored its interior areas, made charts of the northern part of the Gulf of St. Lawrence and the Gulf of Honduras. After that, he made 3 trips around the world. As a result of its first trip in 1768 through 1771, the expedition discovered many islands, explored, and was the first European to discover the eastern coast of Australia, declaring it a colony of England. In the second expedition of 1772 through 1775, James discovered the islands of New Caledonia, Norfolk, South Georgia, and South Sandwich Islands. He crossed the Antarctic Circle for the first time, but he failed to find the South Continent because of the glaciers, and he came to the conclusion that it does not exist. J. Cook was the first to encounter and describe flat icebergs, calling them ice islands. The third round-the-world expedition of James Cook took place in 1776 and lasted for almost 3 years until 1779. This time, J. Cook was looking for new lands in the northwestern part of the Pacific Ocean, thinking of finding a passage around North America. In 1778, he discovered the Hawaiian Islands, reached the Bering Strait, and, meeting the ice, returned to Hawaii. On the evening of February 14, 1779, 50-year-old Captain James Cook was killed by the inhabitants of the Hawaiian Islands in an open fight over the theft of his ship. More than 20 geographical features are named after him, including 3 bays, 2 island groups, and 2 straits. Cook's Travels. Alexander von Humboldt, 1769 through 1859, was a German naturalist, geographer, and traveler. A. von Humboldt was a mining engineer by profession, engaged in botany, mineralogy, and chemistry. He traveled throughout Europe, Central and South America, Russia, the Ural region, Atlia Republic, the Caspian territories, and the Caspian Sea. He considered his main task to be, quote, comprehension of nature as a whole and collection of evidence on the interaction of natural forces. Alexander von Humboldt created such scientific disciplines as physical geography, landscape science, and plant geography. He developed the method of isotherms, drew up a map of their distribution, and in fact gave the rationale for climatology as a science. He described the continental and coastal climates in detail, establishing the nature of their differences. A. Humboldt was the first to draw attention to the danger of large-scale deforestation. Thanks to his studies, the scientific foundations of geomagnetism were laid. He wrote many seminal scientific books, including the following works. A work consisting of 30 volumes, titled, quote, Journey to the Equinox Region of the New World, in 1799 through 1804, and it included descriptions of plants, geodetic and cartographic materials, data from zoology, comparative anatomy, etc. His title, Pictures of Nature, were based on the results of the American expedition. For the first time, ideas were formulated about the close connection between climate and the character of vegetation. His title, Space, is a plan for describing the physical world where Humboldt tried to summarize all the knowledge about the universe and the Earth at that time. Humboldt's travels. Unfortunately, there are no maps in the Ukrainian language, so either we add the originals or you can take the same square of the map in the Ukrainian language and apply the necessary objects. This map can be submitted only if the traveler's route can be transferred to a high-quality Ukrainian map. Language. Fabian Gottlieb von Bellinghausen, September 9, 1778 through January 13, 1852, was a Russian navigator and researcher of German origin and an admiral. Mikhail Lazarev, November 3, 1788 through April 11, 1851, was a Russian scientist, navigator, and naval officer. The expedition of F. Bellinghausen and M. Lazarev, which set off in 1819 on two ships, Vostok and Mirny, to find the mainland and the extreme south of the Earth, became unique. Overcoming the difficulties of sailing under sail in almost all of the solid ice, on January 28, 1820, the ships approached the unknown continent. This is how the sixth continent was discovered, Antarctica. In addition to the mainland, sailors saw many islands. They determined the location of their parking lots and conducted various observations, including the condition of the ice. Today, Antarctica is a continent of international cooperation, on which there is also the Ukrainian scientific station, the Vernadsky Research Base. During the expedition, unique natural scientific and ethnographic collections were collected, and excellent sketches of animal species living in the Antarctic were made. A group of islands of the Marquis de Traversay, Peter I Island, and the Alexander Island were also discovered. This expedition is considered one of the most important and difficult that has ever been made. In 1803 through 1806, the Russian Adam Johann von Krusenstern and the Ukrainian by origin Yuri Lysiensky on the ships Nadezhda and Neva made the first round-the-world trip in the history of the Russian Empire. The purpose of the trip was to find the shortest route for trade between the Russian ports on the Baltic Sea and Alaska, then called Russian America. During this expedition from 1803 through 1806, the map of the world was refined, a number of islands were discovered, and numerous studies in the ocean were conducted. The descriptions of the lifestyle, traditions, and economy of the inhabitants of Sakhalin and Kamchatka were very interesting. A. Krusenstern compiled the Atlas of the South Sea, the most accurate at that time. Y. Lysiensky clarified the coordinates and made a map of Easter Island. Scientists also compiled maps and described the life, peoples, nature, and daily life of such lands as Alaska, Hokkaido Island, Tsushima, Sakhalin, and the Hawaiian Islands. A. Krusenstern and Y. Lysiensky clarified the map of the world, supplemented it with new islands, and removed from the old maps marked there but not existing lands. The collections collected by the expedition represented a great scientific value. During swimming, observations were made of the temperature and density of water at various depths up to 400 meters, sea currents, etc. Later, the researchers published books about sailing on their ships, which were translated into foreign languages and published abroad. Nicholas McClahol McClay, July 5, 1846 through April 2, 1888, was an astounding Ukrainian and Russian traveler of Ukrainian origin from the Miklauho Cossack genus. He was an anthropologist, ethnographer, geographer, researcher of the peoples of Southeast Asia, Australia, and Oceania, and the author of about 160 scientific papers. He was a subject of the Russian Empire, but he spent almost all his conscious life outside its borders, where he made his landmark research and discoveries. In 1870, he went to New Guinea on the military ship Vitiaz. Here, on the northeastern coast of this island, he spends 2 years studying the lifestyle, customs, and religious rites of the Aborigines, the Papuans. Miklauho Maclay's observations started in New Guinea, but continued in the Philippines and Indonesia, on the southwestern coast of New Guinea, on the Malay Peninsula, and on the islands of Oceania. In 1879 through 1880, Miklauho Maclay made an expedition to the islands of Melanesia, in particular to the island of Grande Terre, New Caledonia, and once again visited the northeastern coast of New Guinea. The scientist also defended the interests of colonial people and spoke out against racism and colonialism. He also scientifically substantiated the biological completeness of peoples of all nations and races. Pyotr Semyonov Tianshonsky, January 2, 1827 through February 26, 1914, was a Russian geographer, statistician, and traveler. Under his leadership, the multi-volume publication Russia, A Complete Geographical Description of Our Homeland, and Picturesque Russia from 1881 through 1885, in which the 7th Maloressia and 14th Novorossiya volumes are dedicated to Ukraine. He studied the Central Black Earth Economic Region and traveled to Switzerland. 17 times he climbed Mount Vesuvius, and he led an expedition to Tian Shan from 1856 to 1857. He was one of the founders of Russian statistics and economic geography. He created a school of Russian geography, worked on the establishment of relationships and interactions of natural components. He widely used the comparison method, and he was the organizer of the first all-Russian population census in 1897. From 1873 to 1914, Pishansky was head of the Russian Geographical Society. He participated in the organization of scientific expeditions of Przhevalsky, Potanin, Kozlov, Roborovsky, Valikonov, Mushketov, and Obruchev. Pyotr Semyonov Tianshonsky wrote major works on geography. In 1906, the scientist was given the surname Tianshonsky for his great merits in the study of the nature of Tian Shan, a huge Central Asian mountain system. David Livingstone, March 19, 1813 through May 1, 1873, was a Scottish missionary and famous explorer of Africa whose travel books largely shaped the views and attitudes of Western society in the 19th century regarding the Black Continent. An outstanding explorer of Africa was David Livingstone. In 1840, he went as a Christian preacher to South Africa. In 1849, he passed through the Kalahari Desert to Lake Gami, where Europeans had never been. The following year, he reached the headwaters of the Great Zambezi River. In 1852, David Livingstone, together with many native guides, began a great journey in 33 boats up the Zambezi River. It was then that for the first time in history, he crossed the continent from east to west, from the Zambezi River to Luanda River. Once David Livingstone was going down the Zambezi, a huge waterfall appeared in front of him. The traveler named the open waterfall Victoria after the English Queen. He explored Africa all his life and made the greatest contribution to the study of this continent. His roots.